morning, everybody. Today, we're going to go over the redesign release updates. We're going to start with the USxS side first. I'll cover the releases 8.29 through 8.34, which is the releases between September and November 2021. You can find my PowerPoint where you register. And if you want to see more of the release notes, this is where you registered. Right above it is where you can find the release notes for more details if needed. Okay. So we're going to start with the ODE changes. And if you recall, in June, the 200 funds were classified as custodial funds. And then the plan was to update to special revenue after period H was closed. This has been delayed so that when districts migrate, the data is the same between the two systems. So once the classic changes are released, the redesign changes will also be released, changing it to the special revenue. I did put the JIRA issue here if you wanted to watch it. Other ODE changes includes the receipt codes. ODE added these 4 receipt codes, and that was included on 8.31. And then a receipt code was modified. It was previously called the poverty-based assistance, and now it's the receipt code 3211 is called the disadvantaged pupil impact aid. Changes to posting periods on JIRA issue USxS-R 4475, which was the 8.30 release. This corrected an issue where when you had missing posting periods, it caused balancing issues. So now there's no restriction to, sorry, I'm still letting people into the meeting. So if I'm stuttering, that's why I'm doing that too. Anyway, so now there's no restriction that requires all posting periods to be exist or to be closed before it calculates correctly. So now it's going to work perfect. On release 8.31, the JIRA issue 4767 corrected a message notifying users that they were closing the fiscal year, but they were really closing the month of September. That's been fixed. And then we had a lot of report updates that I'll go over, including the account status report, several updates on the certification reports. We have a new report called the revenue summary with next year proposed, and the new options on the canned purchase order report. So on the account status report, the save and recall was added. You can include the cash account, you can include the full account codes or exclude the full account codes. So you have more options here. And then the budget revenue adjustments are now included on the report. So I have an example of that. You can see that on 8/31, an adjustment was made, and now there's a separate column on this account status report. So that's helpful. On the certification reports, before there was a drop down that kind of confused the behavior of the report. So that was removed. This was the before, and now it looks like this. It has no fiscal year drop down to choose. So it runs for the fiscal year that's associated with the current period that the instance is in. So if you're in November, it's November of 2021, it's going to run for the fiscal year 2022. And then this is our, oops, I have a typo up here. This is the new report that was requested with the next year proposed column, which can be helpful at budgeting time, wherein you want to see the fiscal year to date numbers for this year while you're predicting next year's. So that's under the template reports. And then this is the summary by fund report with also that column. So a couple new reports. And then an option to run the outstanding reports on the canned report has been added. So now the status is either all invoiceable or outstanding that you can choose. And again, let me show you. These are all the canned reports. So here's that purchase order detail report. There's the account status report that I spoke of. The two new reports. Oops. The two new reports that I spoke about are actually under the report manager. Here's the one with next year proposed, and then the revenue detail with next year proposed. So there were also updates that were related to reports, including the as of option on the financial detail report. That's been corrected, so it should be working correctly. On release 8.29, the JIRA issue 4428 now checks for zero amounts for the month to date amounts. We also had another update on that same all amount zero, and that JIRA issue checks for transactions that net to zero. So you could have like a transaction for 10 and a $10 transaction and a negative, making it a zero transaction or zero net effect, but it's still a transaction within that month. And then the release 8.34 updated methods for determining zero amounts. And then the account filter parameter on template reports, that's been updated to recognize it regardless of case. So whether it's capitalized or not, it'll recognize it. If more than one filter is found, a message is going to be displayed to the user listing the values found, and then the user can re-enter the value that they intended to use. But if only one matches the filter, then the template report will generate, because it's no longer dependent on the way it's entered. Account filters also had updates. Let me go into the instance. And we'll take a look at an account filter. So one of the JIRA issues, 4411, allowed you to insert a row by clicking there, clicking on the plus sign, and then your row populates. if you don't know this, but this can move this line up. This can move that account down. Another JIRA issue 4412 allows you to mass grant or mass revoke access. And let me show you how you do that. So we're sitting here in this filter. I select all. However, I might not want these two to be changed, or a couple of these. So these are the ones I want to change. Apply access. This pops up. I can select what I need. Hit OK. And those have been updated in bulk. And then once you save, your filter has been modified in mass. Any questions on that? A bug was also corrected regarding the account filter when a report was generated running a certain account filter, and then the same report without that account filter. It was like picking up the same account filter that was used before, even though you had the user had not requested to use it. That's been corrected on USxS-R 4774. And then 80% performance improvement, saving and editing an account filter was worked on USxS-R 4409. Other updates were made on the Proration Utility. You can see now you have the option to run by appropriation. This was available as of version 8.32. So if you run it, without an account filter, you have the option of saving the file name. You can see without the account filter, you did get all your appropriation accounts, but you got all the appropriation accounts and not just the ones that maybe I'm going to show you with an example of the Bureau of Workers' Comp. So using that example, I would want all my...
Hey, Pat.
Yes. Is there a question? Okay. So my example is going to show you how to use this account filter and run it by appropriation to be used for like the Bureau of Workers' Comp. So I want all my 100 salary accounts. So first, I want to show you this too. We have a new button here to create a POCSV file, and I will demonstrate that as well. You can take that and import it under the PO grid. So again, my example is going to be for workers' comp. We also need, since we're going to be using this POCSV file to import it into a purchase order for workers' comp, we're going to prorate it with the 100 salary accounts, but we're going to import the PO to the benefit account, which are the 200 accounts. So that's where another new feature comes into play, and this is called the account code mapping. So when we look at this mapping, I mapped all my accounts that are going to come out of the proration utility, all my 100 accounts by appropriation. to my specific benefit expenditure account for the purchase order. Now, this does take time to set up, as any mapping utility would. But once you have it set up, you save it and you can use it again. There are handy features like you can add, I think it adds it at the bottom. No, right there. It adds a line. You can delete that line. You have a copy feature. So if you wanted to copy line 5, it copies. So that will help with creating this mapping utility. One other thing before I demonstrate that, that's your mapping. I'm going to show you the difference between the two account filters. So last year, your districts probably did use this for workers' comp, and the account filter would have been for the expenditure TI of 02 and any objects for 100s with the read access. So it would pull all your salary accounts. If I'm going to run that proration utility based on appropriation, then I would want to set up my filter with the TI appropriation 01 for the 100 salary accounts, and then the 02, both with read. So this is going to be the filter that I use with that mapping, and we're going to show you how that works. Okay, so proration utility. I'm going to do calendar year to date. This drops down to, for your selections, my filter is called workers' comp by approach. I check mark that. I do have the option of saving a file name. I click create. It creates my spreadsheet down here with all 100 salary accounts by appropriated accounts. So say my workers' comp bill is $7,500. I would enter that in B1. And as soon as I click off of that, the amounts are prorated and to be added up, prorated by account, but they would add up to that 7,500. So then you do have that option of downloading it, but I'm going to go ahead and create the POCSV. Click that. This pops up. This is where my mapping will tell it to take these 100 salary accounts and put it towards the benefit 200 accounts on my purchase order. If I leave this blank, it will auto assign. I can use this drop down to choose my vendor. This instance is in August, so I am going to actually change my date so we don't get an error. And I'm going to download my POCSV file. It's down here. I'm not going to open it. Sometimes that messes with CSV files. But now, if we go to the purchase order grid and use this import button and choose that file that I just created, this one, it will let me know if it loaded successfully or how many errors. 1 record's loaded, 0 errors. I did get a file down here, but it would say the same thing. Once I close that, I see my PO popped open or popped up. And let me show you that purchase order. You see that it posted successfully to the benefit workers' comp code like 261 or 262 to each of the accounts that were created on that proration utility. So that should be a huge time saver for the district. Now, we do have a JIRA issue. It is USxS-R 4886 that will take care of this rounding issue. Remember, we put 7,500 into our proration utility, and this PO adds up to 2 pennies less. So we are aware of that, and they are working on to correct that. It didn't happen with all numbers that I've tested, but when I used 7,500, it did. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. That will be corrected. All right, so any questions? Some roles changed, and this was out of concern for the tax ID and to be consistent with USPS. If you want the USAS read-only role or the USAS rec role to have access to the file archive, then this permission needs to be added to the user. And if you want them to have access to the tax ID type or tax ID, then this is the permissions that need to be added back. Regarding year end, last year when districts only had non-employee compensation records, the submission file still created miscellaneous records, even though there were none. And that's been corrected on 4495. So that won't occur this year. If the district is planning on submitting their own, we have made this configuration like a storage place for the required fields, which include the name, phone, and email. So when the district submits their own, they would go under system configuration and find this configuration and enter their, check mark that, enter their transmitter control code and their applicable information there. And actually, let me show you that. So I entered a code, Mickey Mouse. So once I save that, and this district is submitting their own to the IRS, you can see where the information populated itself. So now the required fields are there for the district that's submitting their own. Yes, I had a question in the chat that is that only when the district is submitting their own, and that is correct, because let me show you the difference. When they're not submitting their own, I'm glad you asked that because I did want to show you the difference. this would be unchecked. You could leave it there, but you can see that with that unchecked, those fields aren't mandatory for the ITC to have on there. So they're not populated. Also, when sometimes the EIN number might have like a special character, like a dash or accidental asterisk. Now, when the submission file is created, it will no longer, I think I have a screenshot on this. It will drop whatever dash is here when you pull into the 1099 extract. And that was corrected on 4493. It'll remove it automatically and won't cause errors in the system. And then this is the new transmitter report for those districts that are submitting their own. You can see that the totals by type and the number of payees. Again, this is just for district. And then the upcoming release, I don't know, I think it's this Friday, if not next Friday, then the submission file changes, like the specs have been updated or will be updated. And then there'll be a standard 1099 PDF form for printing. So when you're in here, after that release, you'll have the IRS format, the XML format for like edge printing, and then a PDF format available with that. That JIRA issues USxS-R 4444. External authentication has been has had some updates. We disabled the local user authentication if the Active Directory service is configured, and then the user account is updated to use the external authentication. That was release 8.32. We also on 8.33 updated the admin user account to set the flag for external authentication to false. And then a mass change definition was added to USxS to allow mass enabling of the external authentication flag on the user. So if you're on the user, you can see this new definition is right there. Users can now view and download the requisition attachment after it's been converted to a purchase order. And we corrected an auto assign issue that had to do with requisitions with a prefix, and that was on 4474. So from this point on, I'm going to start including the inventory and workflow updates as well. These are also included in the USxS release notes, so I thought this would be a good one to start with. You can see, again, the live version was in September for workflows. We did have a JIRA issue 4742 that separated permissions. So this permission, USxS group, is specifically to create groups and group chains. And then this permission will assign group chains to users. And that's like you guys, the ITC level. And then the group chain was added in the requisition audit trail. So when you're looking at the trail of how it's flowing, it now reflects the chain that it went through. So that's helpful. A problem was corrected that prevented the approver from updating the account code during the workflow process, even though that approver should have had access to change it. So that's been corrected with 8.32. Also on that same release, there was an issue that prevented read-only or rec-only users from approving requisitions. The approve and the reject buttons were like visible, but they didn't do anything. So that's been corrected on that same release. And then inventory. Inventory went live in August 2021. And I have just listed the inventory releases. The first one, 1.1, created the equivalent report of the EIS 001. And the fixed asset by source report had some issues, and that's been resolved as well on the first release. And then the second one had several bug fixes, like the change password link, the lines from the transfer import, just little things. The release 8, or I'm used to 8, inventory 1.3 updated the system not to throw an error when importing dates with zeros. And it also allowed the system to check for any empty dates. Inventory release 1.4 trim the spaces when importing the disposition codes. It also corrected report balancing issues with the report 101 and 104. It corrected the category code grid query. And it removed fiscal year parameter for gap reports. And then grid filters can now include other operations like the less than and greater than that you guys are used to in the USxS in USPS application. 1.41 is the fund and function length will allow up to 4 characters. And the current year acquisition modifications are now updated. The item original cost is now updated. And lastly, the last release 1.5 corrected the depreciation calculation with the salvage value in the last year of the depreciation. It corrected the 101 report that was incorrectly including items for the fund under acquisitions prior to startup. And it corrected the 104 report that was incorrectly including adjustment amounts in the item column. That is all I have on the USxS side. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. I did list the next training next Friday regarding the W-2 submission. You can register at the normal link. Next up is Andrea for the USPS side. So if there's no questions, I'll hand it over to her.
You, Pat?
Yeah. Let me stop sharing. You want me to Continue recording.
Yes. And am I share screen? Okay. How do I share? Because it says it's disabled. Can you share or give me, request me to share my screen? Because it won't let me for some reason. There we go. No, well, got it, I think. Oh, still you. Is that you or me?
I'm sorry, I thought I was unmuted. You should be able to do it now.
There we go. Yep, got it. Okay. All right. I just gotta find where my.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so you can't see that. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
My PowerPoint? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to the payroll side of the releases, and this will take you from September to the end of November, 6.48 to 6.53.1. So I'll be going back and forth between the PowerPoint and actually going and showing you through the actual files. The first one was a leave balance report. We added some, can you still see? Because I keep moving. Okay. The leave balance report added where you were running, it was not including it on the options page. And now it is including on the options page. So now you can see the pay groups that were included. Before that was being left out, and that was a request from some districts that they like to see what they actually selected. The other one was a leave balance report was they added some new options on here. For the output format. So now they can run it in 3 different ways, CSV, Excel, and PDF. The next thing they can do is on the pay amount summary report. This was moved, this was actually under reports at one time. And then they took that out and they moved that over under payroll processing. And now you will see that here when you're in the middle of running a payroll. And now they added also to that is the 3 options that you have here. It used to be just PDF. Now they have CSV and Excel. And now they can actually select pay groups. And before they could not. So now they can select a pay group. If they just want to check a pay group and the summary report, they can do that. They also added the include subtotals. They also added that. And also if they select more than one subtotaling, like pay group and employee name, then you can also include subtotals by secondary stored a field. So if I do that, and generate the report. Now, you can also have it by employee. And that's what I want. What happened to my thingy here? There we go. This is what I want to show. So then when you do your subtotaling, you will show each pay group by pay group 1, and then you can do the pay group by each pay group. And then at the bottom, it would just give you the totals for each. So you still have that option to do the subtotaling on if you want to do a secondary. Okay. And then also what it's doing now also was another thing was a sorting option. Now it's pay group, then last name. Again, I think that was one that was requested and was added to this just recently. So the next thing is the pay amount summary report. Oh, sorry, we were just on that. Let me move my PowerPoint here. Under future, there was a payroll future. There was a request to add a delete and mass delete button. So that has been added now. I don't have a lot of future, but in my tests, but if you had several and there was an error and you didn't want any of those in there, now you could select, it would select all of them and then you could delete. When you do that, just make sure how many are you deleting and you say delete. And then that way you could start over if there was an error by adding. I think that's a nice feature that was added. Now we're going to go over to employee onboarding. There's some changes here that were made. Okay. So on the employee onboarding, there was some requests to, if they actually entered a name wrong, how to correct that. And they wanted it to be corrected amongst all the fields. So now when they're in review, now you can go to the employee screen and you can change the last name, first name if you need to. And what that will do then will change it amongst all these. So this would change here. So it wouldn't just change it on our employee, it actually is going to change them all throughout all of these. So it's just a one-time enter and it's corrected. Now on the employee number, that's going to stay the same. So again, you're going to probably have to update that. If they actually maybe enter the names backwards, Samuel as last name and Smith as first, then that's not going to change. So they're going to have to update that to be what they want it to be, because it probably would have been SAMU 001 if they that was originally what they had entered in prior, if they're using the assigned employee number. So they just want to make sure that they update that also. Some other things with the employee onboarding. To make these a little bit easier and to take some time out was a, sorry about that. Let me put my on mute there. Was the federal is the pay cycle. So when they go in and they enter, when these options are there for these payroll items, you want to make sure the rate type, tax tables is selected. That is not automatically entered, but the pay cycle will automatically be every pay. So that's something they can't change because that's every pay. For Ohio, same thing. Make sure they select what tax tables, and then the pay cycle is always going to be that way. Every pay of the month. Same for city. It's always going to be a percent, and then the pay cycle and employee onboarding. The STRS, again, that's going to be set as rate type as percent. And then again, the pay cycle will be set for every month. And that will goes for the 400, 450, 590, 591, 690, and 691. So the rate type will always be set at percent and then every pay of the month. Then like for Medicare, that's going to be tax tables and every pay of the month. So that way eliminates some extra typing. And same thing for the 693 for Social Security. And then again, for your 800, that's going to be actually set to percent also and every pay of the month. So, okay. The next thing is on the payroll stubs. We had where, move this back over so you can see it, where districts noticed that if they were doing adjustments, the amount and the year to date was not right. It was like doubling. So that was a bug and that was corrected. So now when they do adjustments, it's going to show the correct year to date amount on there for that. If they did a health adjustments, it's always going to show the correct year to date amount. Another one that was added recently was a W-2 report. If they don't have the W-2 abbreviation filled out, it will secondly go over to abbreviation of just the box abbreviation, and it will look at that instead. So if they don't have this first one filled out, it will resort to looking at this here. So they don't need to have both of them filled out if they don't want. And if it's the same name, then they can just leave that W-2 abbreviation blank, and it will automatically pull from the abbreviation here on this screen or on that field. And as you can see here, it just pulls as a house date. So just an example. The next one is the payables detail report combining totals. We had a lot of requests from districts that they didn't like to see the employees being listed several times on the payables detail report. So now, if they have a couple pays, they don't run maybe the city tax to the end of the month and they have 2, maybe 3 pays, just depends on the month. Now that what that would do, payables detail report will all automatically show them totaled in one, instead of showing 3 lists or two employee listed 2 or 3 times on the report. Another thing for the W2 configuration, that would be under your configurations. Let me get back to her over here. So now they did a update where they removed the hyphens for the phone number and then also the zip codes. So now no longer the W-2 report configure will just remove it automatically. If they try to enter it in there, it's just going to remove them. So that way it goes correctly on the submission file. And then when it is on the submission file, this is what it will look like. So if they do enter it in that way, it's automatically just going to put it with no hyphen in there. Okay. The next one is, which we went over at calendar end, was the dependent care. They updated that. So that way now the W-2 will be looking at the 10,500 instead of the 5,000 for 2021. The W-2 report option box. When you go to the W-2 report now, we had a request to add a scroll bar. So if they have maybe 15 added in here, what it's going to do is show a scroll bar. So it will show 6 on the screen, but you can now enter more, and then you can just use the scroll bar to go down to maybe you entered 15 and it will show the 15. You just got to use the scroll bar. Because people were wanting a little bit more, entering more than just 6. And that would be for your box 14. Box 12. Oops, I had that wrong on there. Sorry about that. And then the next one is the sorting options, added payroll count to the payroll count distribution and the budget distribution reports. And those are located under the payroll when you're in the payroll process. And again, those are right here. And they just added some more sort options for the districts. And that goes same thing for the pay account distribution. Okay. There it goes. All right, on to the next. W-2 report options. The new option was added, the new field was added to create W-2 for cities. So districts were wanting, so they can run separate reports for each of their cities if they need to balance them. So the software that we added to do that was a report under W-2 report and submissions. And then down here, way at the bottom, select the city. So as long as the city, you use their city tax entity code, which comes from the payroll item. So as long as you know what that is, then you can enter that in. I just made it simple and did 004 like my payroll item code. So when they run that, now you can see it just runs a report just for those employees that have the 004 city tax in there. So you can see all the employees that have that 004 city tax. And in my files, I only have 4 employees, and it counts them and gives you the tax totals. So if they're needing this for balancing, I think this would be very helpful. Okay. The next one is the quarter report. Like in Classic, who were used to using Classic, they had that calculated adjusted gross different than total adjusted gross from federal records that's listed down in the total summary. We added that in Redesign now. So now you're going to show that under quarter to date and year to date. So now they can see if they're balancing or not. As of right now, we don't have it under the fiscal year to date because it's not calculating correctly for districts that are coming in through the middle of the fiscal year. So they took that off for now until all the districts that will be one fully run fiscal year. And then they will add that back in there. They had to take it out because it was causing more issues than good. So as right now, it's just these 2 totals that they will look at. But again, this will be back, but it's going to be until everybody's on Redesign. Okay. Again, if they are balancing and they don't have any difference, then again, they won't show these difference line and this will not appear at all. So then they can consider themselves lucky and they did well for the quarter and they balanced. One other thing that wanted to be changed was from the 940 line paperwork that the districts fill out, this was not matching. This had changed, so we updated that. So now it's line 13. It used to be line 11 and they changed that now. That is matching with the 941 paperwork. Oh, sorry, Bonnie, I didn't see your message. Will the city tax report move to file archive? I don't believe it will because I think what it's through submission when they run the submission file. I will double check that, but I'm pretty sure that it does not because when it runs, what it does is go to, because it looks at, if you go to the file archive, and you can see what payroll archive report bundles and the calendar year end. And what it goes off was when they run the W-2 submission. So I don't believe that will go under there. So, because that's what triggers it is the submission files when you create it. You're welcome. Let's see, quarter report. Okay, next one is your W-2 configuration. Yeah, here we go. We added some, if they're trying to save and they're not filling out everything completely or correctly, now we put in something, safe things that if they try to push save and it's going to give them errors. So if they forget the contact phone number, and this is something that needs to be filled out to be on the submission files, and they click save, it's not going to let them. And it's going to tell them exactly where they need to go and what they missed. Same thing goes for anything else down here. It adds to it, like submitter EIN must not be below. So again, we put And I think it would be for anything that needs to be entered on the submission file that has to be there is going to throw an error if they don't have it filled out or filled out correctly. So, and again, that goes even for the contact email address. We put that of exactly what should be in there and what cannot be in there. So if you go to configuration, we added that in here. And we put some notes in here. So that way, if they have any questions, exactly what it should be and how it should be, what it has to contain in order for it to save correctly. So again, if you have any questions, you can go to configuration there under systems and go down to the W-2 configuration. The next thing is the refund of payroll items. So once you're done doing the refund through here, and then it goes over here to under payments and refund, we're having a lot of questions and they wanted, how are we supposed to see what the detail is of it? So what they decided on was adding it under here and a detail report. So once I click on that, it creates this report here. So now you can see the refund, the amount, and then what came out. So now it shows the taxes for the employee. So they can print that off and give that to the employee when they give them the check. So they can see exactly what came out, employer amount, employee amount, if they have employer pickup, that's all in there now. Another thing on the quarter report is now they are showing the Medicare pickup and employee contributions separately. So now you're going to see two lines down at the bottom at the deductions item summary page. And also in here. So now you're going to see if the employee is just employee contribution, then they're just going to have one line. This is from my demo. So if they're full pickup, they're not going to have two lines like how mine is showing. Mine is just, my data is kind of not correct. So if they're employee pickup, full pickup, then they're just going to have one line, 692 employee pickup. And then if they're just employee contribution, half and half, employee does their portion and employer does theirs, the 145, then they're going to show the employee contribution. Okay. And then at the bottom of the report, you're going to see the Medicare for the employee. Then you're going to see the Medicare pickup, and then the employer's Medicare contributions. So if you add those two together, these two and those, and then you're going to get your amount of your Medicare taxable wages. Recently, they just did a new, a release came out when they removed the auto calculating of the pay per period and unit amount because it was causing more problems than good. So they completely took that out. So now you're not going to see that anymore in compensations, and you're not going to see that in new contract anymore. So that is completely gone. So when you go there now you're not going to see those fields. The computer's a little slow, sorry. So you can see those are all gone. So they cannot have those anymore. But what they did then, they added a calculate button. So the calculate button has been added to both of these. And then what it will do, it will calculate the values for the unit amount and the pay per period when it's clicked. So if they enter in different things and they click the calculate button, it will figure it out for them and they can save it. Now they just got to remember to do the calculate button because the software still has to just get the right figures in there and to calculate it. If they just save it, I believe it's just save what they entered. That's all it will do. So they just remember if they're trying to get some different, they want different amounts in there, just got to make sure they do the calculate. Okay, the next thing. The contract and the new contract import. Contract workdays can now be, bring this back. The contract workdays are now added into the mass load or the new contract mass load. So now they can upload the contract workdays. Before they could not. And if it's not in the load file, then what it will do will calculate the value using the start and stop dates that they included in the file. So it not necessarily needs to be in there. If they have start and stop dates to calculate, then the system will automatically do that and bring that into new contract and calculate it for them. The pay per period, this changed a little bit since they took away those two fields. What it will do will calculate if they do not provide the pay per period in the load file, and they have all the necessary fields properly that are needed to calculate that. So what if that is true, the file must have the contract obligation, the contract amount. It also must be flagged as stretch pay, and also have pays and contract that are greater than 0. And the pays paid not equal to pays and contract. So again, if all this is true, then the pay per period will be calculated when they load the file in. So not necessarily the pay per period has to be there, but these all have to be in place in order for them to do that, or it's not going to calculate correctly. Okay. On the new contract import, the contract obligation, this will be set to the contract amount if no obligation is provided in the load file. So it'll automatically resort to that. It will also be set to the contract amount if no value is entered and the user clicks the calculate button. Again, this is only done when the calculate button on the new contract and not calculated on button on the compensation. So again, this would be only when you're in new contract. So just a reminder on that. So again, the contract obligation is really not calculated. It is just copied from the contract amount, again, if there's no obligation entered. On the unit amount, will be calculated for contracted jobs if the compensation start and stop dates are calculated or the contract work days are provided. So that is how the unit amount gets calculated. Again, if the unit amount is not on the CSV for the import, then the unit amount will not be calculated when they save it, when the user edits a new contract. They click the calculate button if they want the system to attempt to calculate that unit amount. So they got to remember to make sure they use that calculate button to get that unit amount updated if they're editing it. And then they go ahead and save the calculated value. On the W-2 report, the employees was 0 pay. We had a lot of districts that didn't like employees showing if maybe they had an adjustment or just something was done during the year and it somehow flagged them to be on the W-2 report. And they didn't have any gross or anything on there. So what they did, but they had to be careful because they had some exemptions, especially for people that had passed away in the estate. They wanted to make sure that those employees still got a W-2. So what they did a criteria for employees not to be on the W-2 report was to have the federal year-to-date withholding amount equals 0 and the federal year-to-date gross equals 0. And if the Medicare FICA taxable gross amount equals 0 and OSCI taxable gross equals 0. So they put this in there so that way, if all these are zeros, then the employee will be removed from it. Again, this was so that way people that have the estate of still show in the W-2 report and they weren't eliminated from it. The pay amount summary report, there were some issues there where the deferred doc amount was not included in the total pay count. Amount will not be included in the total pay column, but will show in the other pay column. Districts were not liking that it was showing in the total pay column. So now it's going to be in the other pay column. Also, the LPEs will show in the regular wages column now on the pay amount summary. And then the LPAs, that's pay accrual, will show in the accrued wages column on the pay amount summary. So that has changed. Another bug fix that was causing some issues was the splitting of if districts had employees that had maybe 2 city tax for 003 by position. It was showing that separated on the deduction summary and totals page. So they went ahead and fixed that. So now it just shows one line for the total of the city tax and not by payroll items by position. Okay, next one, the mass load. There were some issues with the mass load employee race fields on our documentation. We got those all updated and corrected. On the custom for the race, custom field primary race, you just need the letter by the next to like A Asian or H for Hispanic. Again, just need the letter in the file. For the race American Indian Alaska, again, it's just true or false. For race Asian, true or false. For race Black, true or false. For the Native Hawaiian Pacific, true or false. The race White, true or false. And again, for the race Hispanic Latino, this one you would need to have this completely in there and make sure that the capital or small case letters are correct. So they can just copy and paste this if they like, but that's on the documentation out under the employee mass load. The next one was the leaves. We were having a lot of problems with districts forgetting to enter that leave unit, in which then it did cause a lot of problems with the balances and stuff like that. So they went in there and added it. It's mandatory now. Now, if they forgot to add it before this and they just noticed it, then they're still going to have to do the corrections. But from the time they did this, they will no longer have to. It won't let you even get past it. It will throw an error at you and say leave unit is required. So they have to do daily or hourly. They can't even say without now. So I think a lot of districts are going to be very happy about that. Save them a lot of heartache. The employees earnings register report. Now the report is sorting by employee last name, first name, and middle initial. So that was something that was updated. On the W-2 form, we had a request that they wanted to have the date and the form file. So now they had the 2021, and then they also added the employer's full name and address and the control number, and it also added the employee's name address. So that's something that has been added for this year when they run their W-2 forms, or so they'll be able to see that now. The new one that has just recently been added is that W-2 city override. What this does is allows districts to customize their submission files for a city reporting. In Classic, I guess this was something that they were able to do, and this was something they really wanted it for this year, so they were able to get that in and completed. And what that is and where they can find that now is under utilities. So what this is now, this is how they're going to create their override for their cities. So maybe only one city in their district is the one that is causing the problems that they need to create an override file because they request something in the file that's not in the file that we have. So what we came up with was here they can go in, they can enter their name of what they're like, if it's just their one payroll item. I just do test 04, and then you can enter a description. And here is where you're going to request those RS field overrides. So if you bump the drop down, you're going to see where you have optional codes. And this is exactly where those, where this change will be in that file. So you can see optional codes. So they gave you 4 options that you can change. And I think these were the ones that were most specifically asked to be changed. So you can change the optional code, state control number, the supplemental data 1 or supplemental data 2. So if the districts, cities are asking for something extra in that data file, then they have that option to add that in. So in my test, I also have, I'll just open this up. So you can see to find what are these field values? So you don't have to come up with those on your own. You come up here to the show available RS field override variables, and that brings up your little box here. So now you have, maybe they want it blank. We'll use city name for the payee assigned to the city item configuration. So then you can put the city name. You can just copy and paste that. You don't even have to type it. That way you make sure you get it correct and just do a copy. Oh, get that back. State abbreviation. We'll use 2-character state code determined from the state on the payee assigned to the city item configuration. The state full name, we'll use the state name determined from the state on the payee. And then the tax entity code, again, that will come from the city item, payroll item configuration. So those are the options that you have to select. And the next thing, once you have that selected, then over here, the dropdown applies to. So maybe you have to do this just for the city that you're going to run it. Once we get to W2 report city, I'll show you where you can select this, where this is asking the tax entity code. So maybe it's just for 003, for the payroll item 003, but you have to, again, make sure it's the tax entity code. So they can do it just for this, but maybe they're creating an override for every city in their districts, all require this. So they can do that for values to all cities. So they have the option to create it for every city if they need to. And then this is all anything they have to do. But again, if it's maybe one city out of the district has to be changed. So they can do this override value only to cities that are not selected in that tax entity code. So again, they have different options. I don't know how many cities require all these changes. I'm not familiar with that. But again, we added this in case ITCs or districts need to do that change. So then I'll bring this up here. And the other thing is include RO record. They have that option to change that. Well, let me see here. Well, thought I had it in here. But they also can change if they need to include RO records in their file. Some cities require that they include that in there. So they can go ahead and make sure they include that and include RO records in that file when they create it. So they can go ahead and also click on that once they save it. And again, they can create as many as they need. So they can create it for many cities or one. Again, it's up to the ITC what they have to do. So once that's in there, then when you go to W2 report and go over to city, right here, optional custom city submission. So now you see they can go ahead and create that city submission override for that city. So make sure they have the tax entity code filled out for that tax city, and then generate the file. Let's see if we can do it here. how long it'll take, we'll see. Got it. So now there is our RO. Before, that would not have been included in that. So that is now included. And then move this back over here. So you can see for the line 195 and 196, the OH, this is where that got printed, put in. So you can see the OH here and this line here. For line 331 to 337, I added an OH in that line. So you can see that here highlighted. In line 338 to 412, you can see where this was added. So we added the city name because the city required that, the full name to be in that file. So that's where that was added. And then again, the line 413 to 487, we added Ohio. So now you can see where that is added. So just in your file here, if you just go across, you can see, if you look at your line number, 195. And if you go down here to the bottom, you can see where it's 195 in the right-hand corner here, kind of on the bottom. So that's how it's updating that file. And then here again, you can see where the Ohio is. You can see where the next line is for the 338. And then if you go to the end of the file, you see where we added the Ohio for the 413. Is there any questions on that? Or if you want me to go over something on that submission file? And again, these files, once you create them and create the submission file, it will be saved under the file archive for that calendar year. So they will be out there once you create that submission file. Okay, any questions on that city override? Again, we have documentation out there for that. If you have any questions on that, any further questions on that, we have it out there. It's under utilities, sorry. Under utilities, W2 city override. So again, you can either send us an email once you get to that point you started creating and the districts are having issues, please let us know. Another thing in there, if they added it by accident, again, you can do the delete button on that at the end of that W2 city override. So that's another thing. If they made it by accident, they can delete it. It's not there forever. They can delete it and start over. So hopefully this is a pretty easy thing for districts to use and it'll be very helpful. The RO, again, when they include that RO on that W2 city override, and what that does then, it brings in that RO field and the RU line on that file. And that would be for anybody with federal medical savings, adoption assistance, or designated Roth of 457B amount. So that's what that RO record is bringing into that file for that city. So if your city, their cities require them to show that on the file, they have that option to bring that in. If they leave it unchecked, then of course it's not going to bring in the RO and it won't have an RU line on the file showing the total. So that's what that RO to include would be. And again, that's all in our documentation. So if you have any questions on that, please check that out there. And again, on the W2 city, on the report, excuse me, we have that in here in our W2 city options. And again, we have that in our documentation. So, okay, no questions on that. The next thing. The last thing I wanted to just put in there was we had a bug on new contract import that we had just was sent in, I don't know, a week ago. So just want to let you know what's out there. If they're doing a new contract and retro amount, it shows correctly in the new contract, but when they activate it and it goes over to the compensation to update the employees or add it, it's the retro amount is blank. It's not working. Or it just resorts back to that old figure. So what they did, well, actually that was two, sorry. Retro amount showing correctly on new contract. So the one was they fixed that, actually, sorry about that, was the new contract is activated, the retro amount was showing blank. That was a bug too. So that was fixed. Sorry about that. But the new bug that was introduced then was trying to change the retro amount in new contract. So if a district doesn't want that retro amount to be what the contract is calculating, they can go in there, change it and save it. But it was not saving it. It was changing it, resorting it right back to the old system, to the old amount. But when activating the new contracts in the compensation, then it was showing correctly. So it's just a bug in the new contract that was showing wrong. For some reason, it just was showing that old figure back in there again. But when they actually activated the contracts, the compensation, the retro amount in the employee's compensation was showing correctly. So just a reminder to districts that, yes, that is a bug. And right now we don't have it scheduled, but this is the JIR issue for that. So if they have any problems with that, that is why. Okay, that's all I have today. Is there anything that would like to be gone over or questions on? Okay, and I think then that's it for this. Next Friday, we're doing a W-2 submissions procedures review. Just kind of going over all the W-2 submissions because of some of the new things that have been added in there. Oh, sorry, from Brenda Kroll. Are there changes for the new ODS reporting with the source? Not at the moment, but that will be updated, I think, here in another week. So it will match what ODS is asking for us. And we do have that out there, and that will be updated before the end of the year. And that would be for classic and redesign. So that is in the works. And that I wonder if that came out today in the release. I guess I didn't see what, because we had a release today. And I didn't get the chance to look to see what exactly was in the release today. So no, that was not in the release yet. So that should be coming here in another week or two. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll go ahead and conclude this for today. Please have a great Friday and have a great weekend. Thank you.